Jamani Williams.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Jamani Williams, councilman for the 45th District, and I am also chair of Housing and Buildings in the City Council. I just appreciate all the tenant advocates and groups that are here today. I can't shout them all out, but I have to shout out Home, so Flatbush Tenants Coalition, I want to give them a shout out as well. So I've been coming here, I think, every year. There is a huge burden that Rent Guidelines Board has. And it's important to put it in perspective because there aren't too many people who are able to champion and assist tenants in the way the Rent Guidelines Board are. The City Council is limited in what it can do, although we're trying the best we can when it comes to harassment. I said recently the governor needs a high fiber diet because he's full of it when it comes to rent regulation and the power he has to make those laws better. The Republican senators don't want to assist. The IDC has been silent on it, so I assume they agree with the Republican senators. And then we have the Rent Guidelines Board. And I understand from the lawsuit that the Rent Guidelines Board can in fact take into account tenants, how much they're paying and their income, which has to be done because for far too long, I don't think that was taken into account. Tenants are really suffering. We have landlords going to jail because of what they're doing to tenants. We have recently, we see on the front page of the Daily News a reprehensible landlord asking people about their status. There was a tremendous amount of money that is being made on the backs of tenants, and we have to be aware of that. Over 50% of people are paying more than 30% of their income. 2/3 are paying over 50%. They are severely rent burdened, according to Street Easy. Typical household can pay up to 65. A typical household is paying 65.2% of their total income in rent. To get $1,277 for an apartment, you have to make $51,000. The AMI for Brooklyn is $44,850, and I'm sure there's people in this room who wish they made that much, and they can assist, and we don't have the power to assist on the MCIs and the AI and the IAIs that get burdened on these tenants. I understand why tenants were asking for a rent rollback. I was asking for at least a rent freeze. You have proposed neither of those. I think it's unfortunate. I hope you reconsider somehow and do a rent freeze. If not, you need to do on the lower end. We have almost doubled in over 10 years the amount of homelessness in this city. It is directly related to rents and unaffordability. We can't have those conversations separate. I'm asking that you take the responsibility very, very seriously. The housing crisis we have in the city of New York is directly related to the rents that are being charged and the reprehensible actions of bad owners. What they've done, however, is sometimes use the small owners to buttress some of the issues they have. My wish and prayer is that small owners at some point will join the tenants because they have more in common than they do with the big landlords of the city, and come with us to Albany so we can rectify the rent regulation, at least give the city council the ability to oversee housing, because most of the people who vote on these things in New York City have no rent regulated housing at all. So I hope that you take this very serious responsibility to your core and understand that your decisions are going to impact all of the tenants in the city of New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Chris Athenaeus, Clara Joseph Perez, and Juliet Bravo.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Christopher Athenaeus. My family and I own and operate several buildings in Brooklyn. On the back of 1%, 0%, and 0% increases these last 3 years, this board is continuing to send the message that you're disinvesting in affordable housing. Just as NYCHA begs the federal government for funding to improve and maintain their aging buildings, we small property owners, too, are begging this board to consider a reasonable increase to cover our increased operating costs over the past several years. The notion that owners have been somehow overcompensated over the past few years is ludicrous, particularly because the PIOC doesn't even measure numerous costs that we have to incur. Each time an apartment becomes vacant, I must comply with the federal and city lead paint laws, which the PIOC totally ignores. It's not in there. This can run into the thousands of dollars depending on the size of the apartment and can go over $10,000. This doesn't qualify for an individual apartment increase or an MCI. The funds to cover this comes directly out of our collectible rent. How can we make apartments safe for our tenants if this board refuses to acknowledge and measure this cost? Recently, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, which regulates oil storage tanks, has been cracking down on indoor oil tanks, which have always had a set of rules less strict than those buried underground tanks. Now the DEC has been considering these indoor oil tanks, those that sit on the floor in our boiler rooms, to be considered underground tanks. This new interpretation requires me to have monitoring devices and take a whole series of steps to ensure the tanks are not leaking. This is all admirable, but the PIOC doesn't take this into account anywhere. Fines for noncompliance start at $7,500. How can I comply if this board doesn't consider this cost in the PIOC? Year after year, the board ignores new mandates and requirements and just expects owners to magically cover these costs. It's basic economics. If you live in a private home, a co-op, or a condo, you understand this. For some reason, this board has turned a blind eye on rent-regulated buildings, just as the federal government has with NYCHA, and just expects us somehow to comply and pay for these costs. The bottom line is, if the city and the state continue to expect us to comply with these new laws and regulations, and this board refuses to acknowledge these real costs, then ultimately it's these people, the tenants, who will suffer. That is the sad reality we all face, tenants and owners alike. I hope that you will consider a reasonable increase to cover our costs and not cave in to the political pressures and misguided ideology that you're helping tenants with a 1% increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Clara Joseph Perez. Okay, we need to hear from our registered speakers, please. Ms. Joseph Perez.
Good evening. My name is Clara Perez Joseph. I've lived in a rent-stabilized apartment for 37 years currently. I'm the caregiver of my 34-year-old son who has Asperger's syndrome. This is the only home that he knows. A lot of my neighbors are very concerned about the rent going up, not only with the renewals, but also with the IAIs, the MCIs, the 20% vacancy, then they wouldn't be able to go anywhere else, and they would be pushed into homelessness. You've heard this before, destabilized neighborhoods, but it's not far-fetched, because across the street from my house in Crown Heights, they just built a brand-new shelter that is sheltering families, the very families that were displaced from the same community due to gentrification. That is totally ludicrous. Now, I know that the board, I wouldn't want to be in your position. It's an awesome responsibility, and I know that by now you probably developed a little thick skin at the darts that are thrown at you. But tonight, I don't focus on the landlord reps because I know where that's going, and I don't focus on the tenants reps because I know where that's going. I focus on the public advocates. What I really want to say tonight is that from the bottom of my heart, I commend you. You probably haven't heard this too often, but I do commend you for that courageous decision that you took last year and the year before. I know it wasn't easy, but it was the right decision. And as a result of that decision, you were subjected to a lawsuit by RSA. Well, March 28th, the decision came through. It was a New York State Supreme Court judge. They saw the evidence, they saw the evidence, the data, and heard testimony. And the New York State Supreme Court judge ruled in your favor and validated your courageous decision. And I ask myself, when a judge does that, they give you the green light. When you're crossing the street and you have a green light, you move forward. You don't retreat. You have to move forward and stay on track. And I urge you this year to stay on track. Follow your conscience, because it was already validated by a New York State Supreme Court judge. And I would like you again this year to consider us and give us a rent rollback. What do we want? Rent rollback. Rent rollback. Rent rollback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Juliet Bravo.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can everyone hear me? All right. Okay. I'm a little bit cold right now. We were coming from our office, waiting for our tenants to head out to this hearing, and the rain just like poured on us, and we had to run to the subway station, and my pants are really wet right now. And I'm a little bit nervous, but I am also really glad to see a lot of people out here supporting. The decision that we want is a rent rollback. You did hear that before, and we've heard your response during the preliminary vote. But these decisions, unfortunately, don't affect you the way that they affect us. And so I know that you're tired of hearing all of the testimonies. We're tired of speaking about our struggles, but if we have to put a face to the struggles, we will continue to show up. Unfortunately, that is the fight that we have been burdened with, for everything that we have, for everything that is a right, for everything that is a human right. Unfortunately, us, the people of color, and from low-income families have to carry that burden to show that they are worthy of, receiving something that is a right. Like, we shouldn't have to spend so much energy on showing up and saying, hey, like, we are people too. We also deserve to live with dignity. And I really want to focus our energies, our future generations' energies, on creating what it is, the communities that we want to look like, right? We want them to be resilient, and we want them to be safe communities for future generations. And we really spend too much time on fighting and showing that we are worthy of investment. And when the city decides to invest in our communities and in our neighborhoods, they're not designing any of this investment to go and benefit us. And so we're really not against any new investment or any new development which we are seeing through gentrification. But if the idea is that it's not going to benefit our families, where are we supposed to go, right? I could talk about my personal situation at home. I can talk about all the repairs that we had needed for years to come. I can talk about how hard it's been for my family to support us and get us through college. I am the first generation college graduate. My sister just recently graduated in May, so that makes two of us. My brother is running up next, so we're gonna have, and there's two others, but I really worry about them because the stability that we had in our family is not the same that my little sister is gonna have to, put up with if the decision isn't favorable. And why do we have to fight so hard to have or maintain a roof over our head? Like, we should really be worrying about what it is that we want to create together and not really resisting to all of the pressures that are really trying to put us out. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Anna Ramos, Bianca Caravaggio, and Robert McCool. Anna Ramos. Okay. Hold, just a minute. Let's make sure it's turned on. Okay, you can start over, please.
Ok. Vivo en un apartamento de renta estabilizada en la área de Coney Island. Qué bueno que hoy estamos, como todos los años, aquí para... Oh, no me... Ay, pero es que no...
All right, we're working on it.
Pero voy a estar viendo para allá. Ok. Así, ok. Es mejor. Ok. Lo vuelvo a hacer.
No, just a moment, please.
Ok.
We're trying to
It's okay.
adjust the microphones.
Hello, hello.
Hola. Mi nombre es Ana Ramos. Otro. Ok. Thank you. Gracias.
Take it.
Si no se oye, yo estaba allá arriba y no oía.
Hello. That's the best one.
Testing. This one lower, yeah.
This one's better. The one Kathy was
Ok. Hola, mi nombre es Ana Ramos y vivo en un apartamento de renta estabilizada en el área de Coney Island. Qué bueno que hoy, como cada año, podemos estar aquí para hablar frente a frente con la junta directiva de la renta y darles a conocer nuestras preocupaciones y dificultades en caso de un incremento de la renta. Todas nuestras comunidades estamos aquí, unidos en una sola voz, en una misma necesidad, y pedimos a la junta directiva tomar una decisión razonable y justa. Muchas familias con niños se quedarán sin techo para vivir. Creo que la junta directiva que está aquí tiene el poder y el deber de respondernos favorablemente. Ustedes, mujeres y hombres de buena voluntad, tienen el poder. Estoy segura que lo usarán para beneficio de nuestra comunidad, de nuestra ciudad amada, respetada y bella, Nueva York.
Hello, my name is Ana Ramos, and I live in an apartment, a rent-stabilized apartment in the area of Coney Island. I'm really glad that we have this opportunity this year to be able to come and face-to-face with the board and be able to share our worries and our difficulties due to these rent increases. All of our communities are here and we're united and we have one voice and we have similar needs, and we ask the board to make a decision that's just and reasonable. Many families with children will be without a home to live in. I believe that the board is here. I believe that the board that is here has the power and the duty to respond in a positive way towards our communities. You men and women of have the power, and I believe you will use that to benefit our communities, our beloved city that we love so much of New York.
Thank you. Bianca Caravaggio.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Blanca Carabajo y soy miembro de Inquilinos Unidos, una organización de inquilinos de la comunidad de Sunset Park, Brooklyn. ¿Sigo? Hoy vengo a testificar que la renta que estoy pagando sobrepasa el 50% de mi ingreso. Soy viuda y tengo un hijo en high school al que tengo que mantener. Hoy vengo a pedirles a todos ustedes, miembros de la Junta que regulan la renta, que consideren por un momento cómo las familias de bajos ingresos vamos a ser afectadas por sus decisiones de subirnos la renta y cómo será afectada nuestra comunidad. Hay muchas familias en Brooklyn y en la ciudad de Nueva York que están en igual situación que la mía. Imagínense con qué dificultad una familia con más niños puede sostenerse.
My name is Blanca Carabajo, and I'm a member of Inquilinos Unidos, an organization of tenants in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Today I'm here to testify that the rent that I'm paying is 50% above my income. I am a widow and I have a son who's in high school, and I need to support him. Today I'm here to ask the members of the board who make decisions on regulating rents to consider for a moment the families that have low income, and how we're going to be impacted by your decisions if there is a rent increase, and how our community will also be impacted. There are many families in Brooklyn and in the city of New York that are in similar situations as mine. Imagine the difficulty of families that have more children to support.
El costo de la vida sigue subiendo y nuestros salarios no nos alcanzan para sostenernos. Por eso, muchas familias en Brooklyn se ven forzados a tener más de un trabajo para mantener a sus familias. De lo contrario, muchos de nosotros muy pronto quedaremos en la calle. Para mí, es muy difícil mantener mi casa bajo esta situación y teniendo un solo hijo. Imagínense cómo se podrán mantener las familias con más hijos. Por favor, piensen en las familias con más hijos al momento de tomar esta decisión. Thank you.
The cost of living continues to go up, and our salaries aren't sufficient to be able to sustain ourselves. And that is why so many families in Brooklyn are forced to have more than one job to support their families. Many of us will soon many of us may end up in the street. For me, it's very difficult to maintain my home in this situation, and I only have one son. Imagine the people that have more children. So please think about these families and these families with children in the moment that you make your final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert McCool.
Good evening. Thank you for the chance to come and speak tonight. My name is Robert McCool, and I've lived in a rent-stabilized apartment in Bay Ridge for the last 11 years. I'm here today to advocate for a rent rollback, or at the very least, a rent freeze. I work for a nonprofit housing organization, Fifth Avenue Committee, helping renters with the dream of buying their first apartment or house. I see every day the economic pressures facing low and moderate income residents in New York City. While wages have been stagnant for many, I have watched the Rent Guidelines Board approve rent increases year after year. Shockingly, rents went up all throughout the Great Recession. For many years, I and many others were certainly not receiving cost of living increases. In fact, I was on a furlough with a reduced salary for several years, Rents went up, and I paid the increases and just absorbed them into my budget, selling my old car and finding other ways to cut expenses and make ends meet. Except for this short and unusual reprieve that we've had in the past couple of years, there's been no limit to the ongoing rise in rents. I am worried about the long-term implications, both for myself and for the clients I serve, but also for future generations of hardworking New Yorkers with low and moderate incomes. I'm worried that another round of increases will undo the reprieve that tenants have received in the last 2 years, and I'm extremely worried about the future affordability of New York City if rents are allowed to continue rising steadily. My colleagues who are tenant advocates say that they see the number of homeless growing, and they report increasing numbers of tenants paying well over 30% of their monthly incomes on rent. As my employer has run affordable housing lotteries, I have seen the numbers of applications rise from 5,000 to 50, 60, and 70,000 per lottery. Residents across the city are struggling with the cost of housing. So thank you for your time, thank you for your empathy, and thank you for giving a rent freeze or rollback a very serious consideration.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Paulette Costin, Marcia Trotner, and Valerie Cooley, or Coley. Paulette Costin. I think so.
Hi, my name is Paulette Costin, and I am with the South Brooklyn Tenant Union. I was living in Red Hook public housing when I found out about my current building, 63 Tiffany Place, in 1997. It was affordable apartments in a good neighborhood for my son and I. It was rent stabilized. So I thought it would give me and my son a good place to live for the future. My landlord is E&M Association, and they own 143 buildings all over the city. They brought our building in 2010. They have been increasing our rents over the years, but the building has not been improved at all. Since 2015, I don't even have rent stabilized anymore. My rent just went up 4%, so I know what it's like. I am on a fixed income. Most of it goes to pay my rent because of the increase. I can no longer afford to go to the laundromat. It's been hard for me to get across the counter medication that I need to take. Sometimes I can't afford to buy my heart pills. It's a struggle to me. Now I am asking you all to do the right thing. Don't let the rent go any higher. Don't make any more people homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Marcia Tratner. Marcia Tratner.
Good evening. I'm reading this testimony on behalf of Marcia Tratner. She's a member of the Southwest Brooklyn Tenant Union, and she can't be here with us tonight because she's working. I moved into my rent-stabilized apartment at 719 Henry Street in Red Hook in 2013 after my former home was devastated by Hurricane Sandy.
Over the course of 2014, virtually all of my neighbors were pushed out of their homes through frivolous court cases, buyouts, neglect, and other harassment tactics. I was the last tenant living in the building when the new owner, Inc. Property Group, started doing demolitions and gut renovations without proper permits. I had to endure dangerous construction, including a pipe that crashed through my ceiling and left a gaping hole that my landlord took months to repair. The experience was extremely traumatic, but despite it all, I kept my ground and refused to leave. It wasn't until sharing my story and linking up with other tenants that I realized that this was not just bad luck, but that Inc. uses this pattern of harassment and construction to displace rent-stabilized tenants and flip buildings all over Brooklyn. To my knowledge, they own at least 13 buildings and hide behind various LLCs, making it harder to hold them accountable. They're literally in the business of getting people out of their homes. They are on the Public Advocate's worst landlord list and also on the predatory equity target list that just came out last week. In addition to enduring dangerous conditions, I have been in court with my landlord for the past 2 years because they refused to accept my Section 8 voucher. To this day, I am still fighting to get a lease and proper repairs in my apartment, while the rest of the building was renovated and my new market rate neighbors are getting grossly overcharged. Affordable housing in New York City is disappearing. I am an artist, I'm trying to move forward, but I'm sick of fighting to stay in my home. I don't see why my corporate landlord would deserve a rent increase. They have done nothing but make it difficult to live there, violated regulations, and displaced entire families. Do the right thing and protect everyday New Yorkers, not corporate developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie Coley. Is Valerie Coley here?
Mike. Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
This is my daughter, Jennifer. I may not be able to continue reading, so she'll pick up for me. Okay, so my name is Valerie Coley. I'm with the Flatbush Tenants Coalition.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
I'm with the Flatbush Tenants Coalition. I'm a tenant leader with the Flatbush Tenants Coalition.
Okay, thank you.
I live at 1 St. Paul's Court in Brooklyn. My landlord is Shemco. I've lived there 39 years. Okay, so my building is still a pretty decent place to live. After 39 years and 4 different landlords, the quality of care has drastically diminished. I raised 3 children in the neighborhood. It hasn't made my life any better. It's just very convenient. So my concern actually is for the preferential rents. I've seen a vast turnover in our building from when the rent increases, when the new lease renewal comes in, and the rent is hiked $600-700. The tenants have to move out. They can't afford it. A couple of months ago, a young lady came to me. She rang my doorbell, and she told me, Miss Valerie, look at this. I don't understand what this is. A lot of times they get these leases with these preferential rents, and they don't look at it. They don't even know what it is. See, they think the landlord is doing them a favor by giving them a lower rent. So they're totally evade the higher rent. So they get the new lease. This young lady came to me. She got a new lease. She's been living there 4 years. So her rent is $1,500. Her new lease came in, her renewal came in, and it's $2,100. Her rent increased by $600. Okay, it's a family with 2 small children. She told me, what is she going to do? The most I could say to her is, it's legal. To me, preferential rents are really legal harassment. Okay? Because now she's planning to move. I went to see her a couple of days ago. She told me she's moving in with her mom because she can't afford to pay rent anywhere else, and she can't afford to pay the $2,100. You know, so preferential rents to me should be totally abolished. To me, it's very cruel. It's a lack of conscience, and there's just no compassion with these landlords. You know, besides the preferential rents, they're subdividing apartments, and they're making 1 bedrooms A one-bedroom apartment in my building that was going for $900 was subdivided to a two-bedroom, and it went up to $2,100. Okay, they're turning kitchens into rooms and hiking the rent. The living room becomes the kitchen and the living room. You know, and these people are crying. They can't afford the rent. But where are they going to go?
Your time is up. Could you wind up your presentation, please?
Well, we're asking for a rollback. That's what it all amounts to, okay? Roll it back. Thank you for your time, and I hope you guys will consider this. Roll back. Roll back.
Thank you. I just want to remind anyone who wants to speak that you need to register at the registration desk outside. So if you want to speak, please be sure to register. The next speakers are Nestle Paul and Robert Desir.
Can we set that translated?
Oh, sure.
Un recordatorio, si quieren dar un testimonio, se tienen que inscribir en la mesa del enfrente, por favor.
Nestle Paul.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you lift the microphone up closer to your mouth, please?
What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to analyze the situation. Okay. The landlord claimed they're not making any profit. Okay.
Can you speak closer to the mic, please?
The landlord claimed they're not making any profit. Okay. And are they really not making profit? Or is it greed? You know? And that's how the act they take any kind of situation that they can use to intimidate the tenant, to harass them into leaving the apartment. It happened to my mother. My mother has Alzheimer's disease. She's diabetic. She has high blood pressure. She has osteoporosis. My landlord, who is Shemko, claimed she owes them $18,000. This is something they were using to intimidate her into getting out of the apartment. They even sue her. Okay, they take her to court, and maybe feeling, you know, sometimes they get lucky, feeling that my mother doesn't have any proof, any rent receipt to prove that she was making payment. Fortunately for my mother, she had all her receipts, and when she came to court, and the case was dragging for a couple of days, and then on the third day, the lawyer for Shemko said to my mother, "It's all right. She doesn't owe any rent." Now it went like that for my mother. What about many people that didn't know to save their receipts? What did happen to them? You know, the landlords are super colossal greedy. Okay, they are looking to make maximum profit. Okay, now it's going to happen a second time to my mother. Okay, now they claim my mother owes them money again. Okay, that's what they do. They want maximum profit. They want to gentrify the neighborhood. They want to take old-time tenant out so that they can bring new tenant that can pay more money for the apartment. And that's how, you know, we in the Flatbush Tenant Coalition, we educate our tenant to organize and develop tenant leaders. This way we can fight the greed of the landlords. Okay?
Thank you.
And to finish, I would say, really, the landlord wants more increase. not because they need it, but it's because they're greedy. Okay? Thank you very, very much. What do we want? When do you want it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert Desir.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
I'm Robert Desir. I am with the Rent Justice Coalition, and by day I'm a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Society. I thought it was very important to testify here at Brooklyn, the Brooklyn hearing, because we've seen a lot of the effects of gentrification here in Brooklyn in areas like Crown Heights, Sunset Park, Williamsburg, Bushwick. The list can go on. At the Legal Aid Society, we've definitely seen a lot of tenants being pushed out. We've stretched at our limits trying to hold these people in their apartments and maintain the tenants that have been there. For this board, I must say that we're heartened that the board has in recent years seemed to expand their inquiry beyond singularly focusing on landlord profits and considered affordability and a lot of the things that are going on that have affected tenants. You saw the lawsuit that was filed, and we're glad that the court affirmed your ability to consider those factors, and I think we're pretty confident that if there is an appeal that this decision will be upheld. However, it's important to note that the affordability gap that started in 2017 hasn't particularly been ameliorated. The last 2 or 3 rent adjustments have gone a long way towards evening kind of the playing field and making up for what has been large disproportionate increases over the last several years, but affordability still hasn't been restored at the levels that we've seen before the financial crisis. We still have a median rent burden that's at 52%. This year we saw that there were more evictions, and as we know, the shelter population remains a persistent problem and for which there seems no relief in sight. In addition, tenants are not getting a lot of help from Albany. There are a lot of mechanisms that allow landlords to increase rents that help them out along their way and go towards the displacement that we're seeing. On the other side, the disinvestment in public housing has continued, particularly under this administration. If their proposed budget for fiscal year 2018 comes to fruition, we're going to see 20,000 people losing rental assistance in New York State. Not New York City, but New York State, but we can rest assured that the vast majority of those people here, the people affected, are actually in New York City. The last thing I want to say is that, the net operating income, we know that's increased. We know that landlords have seen increases in rental and total income. So we ask the board to take all of those matters into consideration and continue along the lines that you have been towards evening what has been disproportionate increases and enact a rent freeze for the tenants this year on the 1-year leases. Thank you. Also, I note that my written testimony has been submitted, and unfortunately I didn't bring enough copies for everyone, but I believe copies are being made. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a question.
Well, we have, in our Legal Aid Society, in our trial offices, we do direct representation. We have a tenants' rights campaign that have been established in the rezoned areas, particularly East New York, where they've seen a wave of a wave of displacement activity targeted at the long-term tenants who landlords feel are the most vulnerable, whether it's elderly people, whether it's the immigrant population. Just today we saw in the newspaper there was a landlord who is threatening to not renew people's leases unless they provide evidence of their immigration status. So there are things like this going on throughout the city. And, like I said, there isn't a lot of help from Albany. There isn't help from the federal government. And, landlords are, I know there was talk about, not being able to get financing, but I think that you would see that there is robust activity in landlords purchasing buildings, selling buildings at rates that were seen at the height of the boom prior to the burst of the bubble. So, and I think that's only going to continue. I hope that answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 10-minute break. When we come back, the speakers will be Stephanie Pear, Jean Folks, and Debner, I believe that's right, Frederick.